Now, in other news, is a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas getting any closer? Well, President Trump says Israel is ready to accept a 60-day truce in Gaza, a period which would be used to work towards a permanent ceasefire. And the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has said that any opportunity to free the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza should not be missed. However, reports say the far-right parties in Israel's governing coalition are likely to oppose any such agreement. And it's not yet clear if Hamas is on board with the plan. It says it's considering the proposal. There have been repeated attempts for a deal to be worked out, but things fell through because of certain sticking points. A previous ceasefire collapsed in March when Israel resumed strikes. Now, the Iranian president has formally signed into law a bill suspending Tehran's cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA. It comes amid growing tensions between Tehran and the UN nuclear watchdog and follows US and Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities and people involved in its nuclear program. Germany said Iran's decision sends a disastrous signal. Well, for all these stories, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Lazciewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Lazciewicz. What's your assessment of President Trump's statement on the ceasefire in Gaza? How well advanced does that proposal sound to you?
I think it is quite well advanced. He is undoubtedly pressing for this, and he has the muscle to make sure it's at least on the table and being negotiated. The central problem is that the far right in Israel, which essentially runs Israel, and of course Hamas, whether they're on board, and in particular this time, it is the Israeli side which is a sticking point, because as far as they're concerned, the entire war, unless it secures the elimination of Hamas, will have been for nothing. And that therefore a ceasefire which will enable the Hamas to regroup, in their eyes, would be a mistake. Therefore, we are certainly not, I repeat, not at the ceasefire stage, nor are we necessarily going to be. But Donald Trump and the other moderators have done good work in getting this far.
Nevertheless, this is happening less than a week before Benjamin Netanyahu is due to be in the US to meet President Trump. I mean, how significant is that? I'm wondering if it is unlikely that Mr. Trump would have agreed to a meeting with Mr. Netanyahu if he wasn't calculating that he'd get the ceasefire.
No, I wouldn't agree with that analysis. The problem is that Donald Trump, for a start, doesn't calculate as far as one can tell. And secondly, he lives in his world of quick deals. In business, this is in fact true. You can sign a deal in an hour, a very substantial one. It has happened, not in politics. And I think he hasn't fully adapted to the political world. Secondly, he is forever making these assumptions which are optimistic and arguably very pleasant in the sense that he wants a ceasefire, which afterwards turns out to be impossible to realize. Look at the Russian-Ukrainian war. It's still going on. No 24 hours. We're still far away from anything. And therefore, no, I don't think he did that. I think he supposed there would be a deal. I think he wanted that there be a deal. And indeed, it is possible there will be a deal, but not necessarily. And it's entirely possible that the trip may either be called off or, in any case, totally different to the one he planned.
So, I mean, from what you're hearing, Dr. Lazciewicz, what types of things do you think Israel is in the process of agreeing to from its side? I mean, there's a lot of talk. You talked about some of the issues with the coalition and the sort of the more far-right politicians in it and how they're likely to react. But I wonder if Mr. Netanyahu has politically more space now since he went to war against Iran and his popularity went up in Israel.
Yeah, the key problem is to translate popularity into support in the Knesset. And unless he finds other allies who are prepared to support him in power, the far right still holds the whip hand. And that is the key problem. Sure, more people support him. Quite possibly other parties look at him somewhat more favorably than before, but that's a long way to saying that they're prepared to be his allies in power, or that he, in fact, wants them to be in power with him as allies. So therefore, yes, there is a point like this, but I don't think it's a crucial one. And I think his room for maneuver as a result is not as great as you've implied.
And when it comes to Hamas, as we mentioned, Donald Trump has urged the group to accept the deal. What will Hamas be wanting out of any next potential pause in fighting and demanding from its side? Is it now essentially about how they will continue to survive?
Yeah, I don't think that's Hamas has no plans to cease to survive. In any case, to be quite honest, even if they were to say tomorrow they disappear, it would simply morph. In other words, the movement into another name, under another name, would be precisely the same problem. There are, for example, independence moves. For example, in Poland, there were loads of these organizations which sprang up, changed their names, others sprang up in their place. And so the whole business of Hamas itself being eliminated is, in my opinion, a red herring. However, Hamas itself as an organization isn't, of course, a red herring in that respect. And they do want to survive. And at present, they have survived. And what they're looking for is an end to the fighting so they can regroup and rebuild. For this, they're presumably quite prepared to hand over all the hostages. But here comes the point. It will be with, in effect, a peace treaty whereby it's as before, with Gaza being rebuilt and them still in charge.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu has said in the last couple of hours or so that he still wants to see the eradication of Hamas in Gaza. I mean, is that possible from a military point of view? Is that still a realistic strategy, do you think?
No, it never was, because to be quite honest, I've said, even if Hamas were to disappear tomorrow, it would morph into something else. At the end of the day, the Gazans want what many other people in the world want: to live free, independent as a nation. And this has not happened. President Netanyahu did say that they were in effect free, but that's the point. It was in effect, it was de facto, they had some autonomy. They've never been de jure a state, because Netanyahu has said, not on his watch, ever. And so from this point of view, it doesn't look very promising. Netanyahu, if he wants to eradicate Hamas, which is, if you like, a daydream in that respect, would result in war carrying on until what? I mean, you cannot eradicate an idea.
Well, let's turn to Iran that we mentioned just a hot second ago. The country's president has formally signed into law a bill suspending Iran's cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA. It follows those recent US and Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities. I mean, how serious is this move by Tehran, and what are the implications in your assessment?
It's semi-serious in the sense it shows Iran is not interested in just having a peaceful nuclear program, but we knew that anyway. It's semi-serious in the fact that it has stopped cooperating with the UN. It's in itself a very significant move, underlining that Iran now is, if you like, outside the UN in that respect. But it's only semi-serious because, you see, in negotiations, everything can be turned back as before. And so therefore, it could be seen as a negotiating ploy. What I think it does mean is Iran is not prepared to surrender in the sense that Israel and America wanted. And therefore, as a result, the implication of Iran's move is that the war will eventually be restarted.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Lazciewicz. We appreciate always your assessments. Dr. Marek Lazciewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.